Hi, welcome. I'm Brad Fraser, and this is Old Movies for Young People, the show where I, an aging homosexual from the 20th century, show him...
Spencer Shunk, a young straight guy who grew up mostly in the 21st century.
A movie from my past that I find particularly interesting to find out if it has any resonance with young people today. And tonight we're talking about All About Eve. This is probably the best movie about the theater that's ever been made.
I think you're right, it is the most brilliant movie about the theater ever made, and if there were a better one, I wouldn't even want to see it.
The plot involves a major stage star named Margo Channing, who has a young, desperate actress come into her life named Eve Harrington, who eventually ends up replacing her. It's the classic rags to riches, understudy taking over story, and it's told brilliantly.
You see the play? You've seen every performance of this play?
Yes.
But don't you find it, apart from everything else, don't you find it expensive?
Standing room doesn't cost much. I manage.
I'm going to take you to Margo.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, she's got to meet you.
That Bette Davis is an aging actress. She is no longer young, she is no longer glamorous, and Anne Baxter represents all of those eager, crazy little bitches who are just waiting to replace her.
I have a suggestion. There's really not very much time left. I mean, you haven't had a minute alone yet. And, well, I could take care of everything here and meet you at the gate with a ticket. If you like.
But what's great about the movie is it has that kind of archetypical quality that it could be about the theater in the 19th century, it could be about the theater in the 1940s, it could be about the theater right here, right now. It could be about Stratford. It could totally be about fucking Stratford, let me tell you that.
I think the structure of the movie is really interesting too, because it's actually all told in a series of flashbacks, is it not? Because
Yes.
we're at that award ceremony right off the top where Eve's about to get a huge award, and all the major players of the movie are all sitting around at tables, and you can see Margo Channing having this very jealous look on her face, and Addison DeWitt brings us in, and he is the narrator that we trust, but he actually turns out to be an unreliable narrator, which I love about this movie.
But Addison DeWitt, as played by George Sanders, who is a brilliant, brilliant actor, is everybody's idea of that horrible theater critic that we all know they are inside.
Once in a great while, I experienced that moment of revelation for which all true believers wait and pray. You were one. Gene Eagle's another. Paolo Wesley, Hayes. There are others, 3 or 4. Eve Harrington will be among them.
I take it she read well.
It wasn't a reading, it was a performance. Brilliant, vivid, something made of music and fire.
How nice.
Bette Davis as Margo Channing, and it must be said, this part was originally given to Claudette Colbert, who broke her back and had to drop out at the last minute, and Betty stepped in very happily. But what's interesting is if you look at Claudette Colbert and you look at Anne Baxter together, the whole casting thing makes a lot more sense because there's a much stronger physical resemblance between the two. That being said, I don't for a second believe that Claudette Colbert could have turned in the performance that Bette Davis does. This is probably her best work.
You're being terribly tolerant, aren't you?
I'm trying terribly hard.
Well, you needn't be. I will not be tolerated, and I will not be plotted against.
Here we go.
Such nonsense. What do you all take me for? Little Nell from the country? Being my understudy for over a week without my knowing it. Carefully hidden, no doubt.
What's interesting about the movie as well is that Anne Baxter is a very ambitious young woman, and she will stop at nothing to get what she wants. She literally tries on Betty's costumes while Betty's in the dressing room and looks at herself on stage. She tries to sleep with Betty's director husband, and when that doesn't work out, she tries to sleep with Celeste Holm's playwright husband. And you know that's really desperate because nobody sleeps with a playwright. But this movie is the quintessential Bette Davis movie, and the reason it's the quintessential Bette Davis movie is because it's written by Mankiewicz, and Mankiewicz is a clever, witty, urbane man.
Funny business, a woman's career. The things you drop on your way up the ladder so you can move faster. You forget you'll need them again when you get back to being a woman.
There's also Celeste Holm, who plays the wife of the playwright.
Since you left Radcliffe.
That cynicism you refer to, I acquired the day I discovered I was different from little boys.
Marilyn Monroe, though, in this movie really makes a mark in the one sequence that she had.
Oh, waiter.
That isn't a waiter, my dear, that's a butler.
Well, I can't yell, oh, butler, can I? Maybe somebody's name is Butler.
Then, of course, there is the indomitable Thelma Ritter.
Oh, brother.
Miss Coonan?
Oh, brother, what?
When she gets like this, all of a sudden she's playing Hamlet's mother.
So this movie is chock full of amazing women and Addison DeWitt, and then a bunch of men who are essentially stuffed suits, who are generally uninteresting, cannot hope to keep up to the women in the acting department, and have very little to do with what actually goes on in the movie.
I think that's very deliberate. It seems like the movie is totally conscious of that, because the men even look interchangeable. The director and the playwright can hardly honestly keep them apart. But in the end, Addison has control because Eve has basically sold her soul to him. And there's a fantastic fucking scene in that hotel room at the end,
yes,
where the power shifts back and forth between them so many times. It's so well written.
I don't enjoy putting it as bluntly as this. Frankly, I'd hoped that somehow you would have known, that you would have taken it for granted that you and I...
Taken it for granted? That you and I...
Now remember, as long as you live, never to laugh at me, at anything or anyone else, but never at me.
Get out.
You're too short for that gesture.
The dialogue and the performances are so strong in this movie that you can get lost in individual scenes, and every scene is so strong on its own that it almost doesn't matter where they fit into the grander narrative. You know what I
Right.
mean? You can kind of just sort of extract anything and be like, boom, there you go. Now you love All About Eve.
And it also must be said, and I know again your generation doesn't really like black and white movies, but
True.
the photography of this film, there's a gloss to it, there's a light to it, there's a beauty to it that would not work as well in color. It would seem cheap in color, and the black and white gives it a kind of gravitas it wouldn't have otherwise.
Amen.
But do you think you could convince people of your generation to watch All About Eve?
I think I could.
Like
yeah. Most people I know. Anyone who was, anyone who was even peripherally involved in the arts
But what
or
if, what
theater.
if you went to what if you went back to Fort Erie and you were
Right.
showing people you went to high school with Fort Erie with? Would they say, "What are you, a fag?" or would they watch the movie and love it?
That'd be a tough sell.
Right.
Try
So
to
they'd
get them
probably
into
say,
it.
"What are you, a fag?" Right?
Well, maybe not exactly those words, but that would be the.
That's what
that
they
would be
that's what
the.
they would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. That
Would
be
you
the
recommend
message.
it to them nonetheless?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you do a Bette Davis impression?
No.
We know you. We've seen you like this before. Is it over or is it just beginning?
And that's it on All About Eve. I'm Brad Fraser,
I'm Spencer Shunk.
and this is Old Movies for Young People. We'll see you next time.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
We